Hello from beautiful Irvine, California. This is Shane Starr with Philosophical Reflections on Religion, and this video was supposed to be made a couple days ago, but work got in the way. So here we are. Our subject is, does prayer actually work? And long story short, it depends on what we mean when we're asking that question. Starting from a real simplified version of prayer, if you're praying, God, please let me get this new car, or God, let me win the lottery, or God, let that person I'm head over heels in love with love me back the same way. I don't think prayer works that way. It might, circumstances might come into play that result in the thing you wanted, but it won't be because you prayed for it. Let's back up. Starting from the beginning of this channel, and you mostly hear this in non-Catholic Christian circles, and I'm Catholic but with a non-Catholic background, we talk about, in general Christianity, religion being a relationship. And I think that's the model that, even as a Catholic, I've set my entire religion on, is that it's a relationship. And within the context of this relationship, in any relationship, there will be communication going back and forth. And for Christians, we call this communication prayer. So backing up to our first example, like a kid or a teenager or an immature adult, imagine being in a relationship with someone, either a friend or family member or roommate, and the only time they talk to you is to ask you for something. And oftentimes people like that, since they don't have a real relationship with you, they don't have a knowledgeable understanding of your circumstances, or maybe of even their own circumstances, they're going to ask you for things that aren't really appropriate. So we're talking about things like, a little kid asking for more candy at Halloween. I say no, not because I'm mean, but because I see down the road he's going to get sick from eating too much candy. I'll have, maybe in real life, I'll have an older son ask me for something, and I know, I've seen this story play out. I know how it goes. I know what he's really asking for, and I know if I say yes, how that's going to go in the end. And oftentimes people don't even realize what they're asking for. I think when we pray to God for specific things, like, God, please let me get this job, please let me win this award, please let me do this or that, we don't understand that were God to grant our prayer, and maybe God's already granting that prayer before we even pray it, but in terms of answering our prayer, God knows that it will be worse for us in the end, like the kid with the Halloween candy. Case in point, maybe God gives you that job you really prayed for, and because of that, you miss another job that would have been better, or another relationship that was really meant for you. There's a story about a mouse thinking it had the worst day ever because as it ran across the road, a bird crapped on it, and it was like, look at all this, it's awful, and then a leaf got stuck on him, and then he's just in a mess trying to clean it up, and he thinks that was the worst day ever. And it turns out that an eagle flying overhead would have eaten him had the leaf not bent over him, sticking to him from the crap that got on him. You know, maybe that's not the best story, but it's what came into my mind right now. Sometimes when we think the worst thing happened to us and God didn't answer our prayers, it's really the best thing that happened to us. And sometimes when the best thing we think happens to us, and I'm living proof of this one too, you know, we get that person we really wanted, or we get that thing we really wanted, it ends up being a curse in disguise, you know. So there can be blessings in disguise and curses in disguise. So how do we fashion prayer to make it work in that sense? It's going back to the context of religion in general, at least as envisioned in this channel. It's all about a relationship. The better your relationship is, the better your communication will be, the more clearer God's will be in your life, the more clearer your requests will be. And, you know, how do we do this in practice? Well, Jesus gives us a great model, the Lord's Prayer. Instead of reciting it right here, I think anyone watching this knows the Lord's Prayer. The model is first acknowledging God. God's in control of everything anyway, whether we pray or not. God is the author of being, the king of the universe, everything. So we want to acknowledge God first. Then we ask God, not for anything specific, we ask God for what we really need. And what do we really need? We need our daily bread, our energy to get us through the day, and to do the actions that we were meant to do, big and small. And what really matters here is loving others and asking for forgiveness when and where we fail, forgiving others the way we hope to be forgiven, and God protecting us from sin and evil. That's the model. Acknowledging God, understanding what we really need, and praying for that. The rest is details. You know, God will take care of the details, just like He knows the numbers of hairs on our head, or the sparrows are taken care of. Everything is under God's control, and if we're in a relationship with God, we can acknowledge that. So if that's the case, then why pray at all? God's already doing it or not doing it. There are tangible, concrete benefits to prayer. The video that actually initiated this idea for this video on my channel actually had to do with neuroscience and the power of prayer by the Stanford professor and scientist Andrew Huberman. Again, that's Andrew Huberman of Stanford. Look him up on YouTube. I'll put some links in the video below. He talks about his own development and relationship with God through prayer. And from a scientific standpoint, you know, you've heard this probably already, that prayer changes not God, but the one who prays. Well, there's truth to that from a scientific perspective. Prayer results in better coping, as is measured by studies that Huberman brings up. Lower stress and anxiety, measured by blood readings. Better well-being. Studies show that both short and long-term health benefits are achieved through prayer. And really, I think Andrew Huberman is focused on things like cortisol levels lowering, being able to go with less or no meds at all for coping with that kind of thing, with stress. There's been lots of experiments that show that praying for others helps them, but Some of these experiments have had mixed results. Most of them show positive improvement. But again, going back to the beginning, we have to look at our prayers, even Jesus' own prayers, like when he was praying in the garden, let this cup pass from me. We have to understand our prayers and the answers or lack thereof in the wider context of the universe and God's will as a whole. So I think most of us think of prayers being answered or unanswered. Aside from the immature version, we think of when someone's sick and we pray for them. Sometimes they get better, sometimes they don't. And this is partly overlapping with the problem of evil, and I think everyone struggles with that to some degree. But in the wider context of the universe, and we think of time on a cosmic scale, the difference between 100 years on the planet and 50 years or 50 minutes, it's not as much as we think it is. Life is precious, life is beautiful, and we want to prolong it as long as we can. That being said, all of us will be gone at one point or another from this physical universe and on to the next. And so we have to think in terms of the wider context of the universe, including space and time. And when we pray, we can pray in earnest and give thanks when those prayers are answered, and pray for understanding when we feel like they're not. But we'll always have faith that when we pray, all things work together for those who love God, as Paul says in his letter to the Romans. So, in conclusion, does prayer work? It depends on a lot of moving parts. It depends on who we're praying to, what we're praying about, the context of the situation, the context of the circumstances, and I believe the context of our relationship with God. Next time you pray, keep all that in mind. Until then, God bless, and see you next week.